Yes and no. It's a bit like asking breaks for us. Sort of a social contract, I suppose. We understand their position in terms of land. But having a strip of 20 metres or so, whatever it is.
But as a farm, the farmer would, the city would own land. So you would say, it's totally defensible.
Let's get it.
Let's get in.
Sorry, Cara.
That's all right.
Go for it. Sorry.
Okay. No, thank you. We're moving into our long-term plan workshop number 4. Yes.
I'm putting numbers on it because I can see by about March next year we'll be able to be at 37.
Yeah, it'll be a milestone at double figures. So the purpose of today's workshop is to discuss the next steps for identifying issues and opportunities for Council's external facing activities. This includes levels of service, to share back with you what we heard about SSPs and those that you would like kept in for consideration as we continue the review. And we'll share some examples of alternative approaches that we're finding as we do the early stages of this work. Then I'll hand over to Jana and she will discuss early engagement with you, topics that you'd like to go to the community on and ways of engaging with them. So where we need to get to today, just an awareness of where we are in the process, whether you have any quick wins or initial thoughts about levels of service, and to receive a clear steer from you on early engagement topics and ways of engaging. So this is a slide that we'll keep bringing back to you and keep building on as we progress through the long-term plan. It's a way of capturing the issues that have been discussed and those that we've received signals to be included in the long-term plan. So Back to Basics has filled up quite quickly. There's still room. And so this includes everything that was signalled through the Council's plan on a page, through the Chief Executive's KPIs in relation to the long-term plan. Also captures the living wage, which Council agreed to explore as part of the long-term plan amendment 2023-24. And it includes matters that have been raised in other workshops, such as parking fees, rates for solid waste, town centre, to expand Māori contribution to decision making. In the growth focus and future focus area, we have also material that has been drawn from the Chief Executive's KPIs, the Council's plan on a page, and we have added the integrated growth planning that Lauren talked to you about just before to make sure this all lines up. The WMMP box that will fill up but is being progressed through other discussions with you. Our building blocks box on the right will also keep expanding as we progress and as different pieces of the puzzle are discussed. So we've got ticks already beside our community outcome topics, the time period of the long-term plan and the population forecasts. Today we've got non-mandatory SSPs to keep as part of the review, and other forecasting assumptions and pieces will fit in there as well. So this is, it will evolve. Right. We then move into external facing activities. And the purpose of this is to talk about what will be coming up for you over the next couple of workshops. What we'll be doing is presenting you some briefing material, some early reading about each of the different activities, setting out what we do, why we do it, and how much of our services we currently provide. It will also talk about what are the issues and opportunities staff have identified that could be dealt with through this LTP. At the workshops, these will be presented to you by the activity managers, opportunities for questions and discussion. And then we'd seek signals from you about levels of service for us to factor into our work. The activities that are included in this are those that were included in the long-term plan previously that you would have seen in the long-term plan amendment. So we have community development has been under the heading community support, community facilities, community infrastructure property, each of the three waters, roading, solid waste, regulatory services, and representation and community leadership. So I'll split these over 2 different workshops, and yes, we'd be seeking your guidance about where you would like to see changed levels of service, or if you would like us to continue with the current levels of service. And just noting that levels of service doesn't necessarily just relate to funding, it's also where attention and focus is prioritised. Where we'd like to get to with that is something like this. This is something that Waikato District Council did, and I was talking to someone and quite liked how easy it was to visualise it and have the messages there as well. What this is in those workshops we would seek signals from you, and then about where you might be on the dial. Is the current level of service right, more, lower, even lower, higher? And pull that all together and bring it back to you to check that we've understood it right, and then progress from there. So it'll be really useful as a way of just checking back about what we're doing, but also could be useful for our documents, for conversations with the community when we're having early engagement, the full consultation. So yeah. And as we've been talking, and maybe in the early workshops, we just wanted to pause, and before we moved on, ask whether you had any initial thoughts about levels of service you'd like to change. Any quick wins, if you like. Just remembering that levels of service doesn't necessarily just mean dollars, it's attention and focus as well.
Kara, one of the things that you had in your previous slide about, you talked about, one of the topics was fees, parking. Are you talking about raising the fee that people pay in there, and we're going to consult on them? Or are we just, is that what you're referring to, or other bits?
I think it could be that.
Yeah.
But it also reflects some of the guidance that council have given us out of the town centre workshops that we've had.
Sure. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it was specifically, I think, Horowhenua, you raised that in terms of helping fund the town centre by parking meters and the...
Just in that immediate area, just where it's currently free, and in that immediate area where we're looking to progress steps. And I think I covered why, so yeah, more car park.
Sorry, I wasn't privy to that.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah. That's all right. Just ask the question.
When you went to the half steering wheel, it talks about roadside drainage. Is that like rural roadside drainage, or is it for stormwater purposes? Is it? Do you know where that's coming from?
Apologies, this is just a cut and paste of the Waikato material. So this is an example rather than a proposal. Yeah.
So can I just ask? But it's a little bit. I think I'd like to see the more information because I would have a cliche and say I'd like us to do less of the fluffy stuff, but then I couldn't point to a particular thing and say because I don't know how much that stuff costs. I don't know how much time it involves, and so. But I imagine that through this exercise, you're not going to give us a detailed overview of well, we spend X amount of time and X amount of dollars on this. So it's kind of just going to have to be a bit of a gut feel around what activities we think are priority or not. But yeah, so the next wave of information is going to give us a little bit more illumination of sort of some of the granular level of activities and right, and so that I think might be the best. Well, that's what I'd be more comfortable responding to, just so that it's not just sort of a bit haphazard and shotgun approach at stuff that, yeah. Anyway.
Thank you. We really wanted to check in whether there was any burning issue that anybody had. And so, yeah, really happy to come back with any more detailed information as well and continue that conversation.
Sorry, the only question I've got around that is, and you might help there, around that stormwater. So we budgeted extra stormwater stuff. How much of that comes into levels of service and whatnot? And so if there's something burning for me that's stormwater, how we continue to mitigate. And
Thanks, Ross. And that's a that's a very good example of just that early steer. We've heard, for example, historically a bit of a steer around footpath investment. So it's just like the team will come back with the detail, but the earlier we get the signals about what's in scope and what's out of scope, the better prepared we are for those conversations. Because as you can see in that previous slide, the back to basics is kind of, Carol used the term, there's room. Like there's not, our scope for the LTP is already growing by the day, and so the early steer is helpful.
The CRMs that we get per annum, there would be trends in that, I'd imagine, and I wondered which of the higher sort of customer requests come through, and what of those could we potentially get a quick win on? Okay, that's my initial thought.
I like when things are cheaper and wondered if we needed our pools to be open till 9 p.m. every night, and what are our step counter steps between 7 p.m. and 9 p.m. on the pools? How utilised is it versus the staff cost of how many lifeguards we have there? Should we have it open on public holidays where it costs time and a half? Yeah. I mean, if we're just listing random things, that's a question I'd like to ask the community. Do you want your pools open after 7 p.m. because it's not cost effective to do it? The pools already run at a loss generally. Is this where we lose the most money? Let's find that sweet spot and ask the people.
Same with libraries.
Yeah. I like libraries more than water.
Yeah, on that note, certainly looking at the library offering and what that looks like too.
And Carol, I'd signalled a couple of workshops ago just that firefighting one, that's still a big issue, particularly for us as a growth council, so we really need to sort that.
Are we just doing wish list stuff? I mean, I'm only going to do them as I think of them. But we have a rural halls fund. I'd like to see that split into two. Currently, it covers all Malai. I'd like that to be a separate contestable fund or part of our multi-engagement framework. Probably better under that than as a contestable fund.
and I've asked quite a few questions within the SSP stuff, which kind of, or let me just pull an example, CF18, where it's not a mandatory one, but there's a New Zealand standard around $7 per capita. You multiply that by our population, I don't know, it was 259,000, I think it was. And is that year on year, and could it be a little less? Because I guess in a long-term plan, take the 3 years, at 777,000 just on new books or items, because there's other lines in the budget that take care of the other parts of what we provide there. So anyway, so
And that might be a very nice connection into the next piece that we'll look at, the SSPs. And we wanted to start with your feedback, so thank you to all of you who sent through your feedback. We have uploaded the updated Excel sheet in your table, which has columns with the feedback that we've received, just pulling together so you've got it in one place. So what those responses indicated was that there's a preference for a smaller number of SSPs in the long-term plan, with other matters taken out but still measured. Clarification is sought of some measures, and suggestions to make them more meaningful. So we'll take that and the questions and suggestions that you've made and continue to look at best practice and to prepare to bring some material back to you. What we wanted to look at today is some examples of how other councils are presenting information. So these are ideas rather than proposals. And there's a couple of ways that we could change what we're doing. The visual presentation of it, so how can we make it more engaging for readers, particularly if we're encouraging first-time readers, and different ways of measuring the services provided, making them more meaningful. So what we have here, first one, this is an example of presenting the outcomes at a glance. So for each of the key activities listed down the left, just presenting that in one place, mapped against the community outcomes. As we go through these, what I've done is I've put the links to the documents on the slide, and it should work that if you right click on it you can open the link and have a look yourselves. There's different ways of showing the outcomes, and this is a way that Auckland did it. It's quite simple. There's a lot of white space, making it really easy to use. It also links to the community outcomes, and it shows quite directly what the part of the outcome it is attaching to and what is the action that is being done to deliver on that. Something like this could be used in a range of documents, websites, and other ways that we're sharing information with our community. The next example that we've got, this is from Wellington City Council. There's a lot of information on this page, but what it is that Wellington City, they tell a connected story of their SSPs. The dark blue box on the left is their introduction, their outcomes at a glance, and the activities beneath it. They set out the activities in the group, the rationale, services they provide, going into key projects and programs, giving it an overview of it, little snapshots, talk about the key negative effects, which is required to be include graphs of the operating and capital budgets so that you've got a really clear picture. And then they say what you can expect of us, and this is their performance measures. I pulled this one out because they've also recently reviewed and changed their SSPs, and so what they've done is explained that, and it's in the yellow box on the right. They just bring people along and tell the community they've reviewed them, and where there has been a change in measure, a new measure that's included, which is the couple of the blurry lines in there you might make out changed, and where it has a similar measure but it's not directly related, they've just included that on the page as a footnote so that they provide a connection for people who want to look back, but they're transitioning into their new way of working. Yeah. So it's something that we could look at. Example 3, this is about changing the measure themselves. And I pulled out this one because another reason that we were looking at our improving our SSPs is some feedback that we got from Council Mark. So Council Mark, you might be familiar, is a local government excellence program that's designed to demonstrate and improve the value and services of council by measuring indicators across leadership, financial decision making, service delivery, and community engagement. Now, they pulled us up about our regulatory measures when they reviewed us in August 2021. They noted that they weren't connected to our community outcomes, and that basically we were just measuring against provision of a service within time. It didn't connect to the outcomes or provide anything more meaningful there. So what could be done, this is an example from Auckland. So they also talk about responding within 30 minutes. They also have a record talking about the compliance rate, and the compliance rate for dogs as well, and a movement, say, from compliance of menacing dogs that reach compliance within 3 months. So that's signalling an actual change, and is something that we could consider for some of those types of measures.
So Karen, this is where like the council mark thing doesn't quite reconcile with this, because like the example there that you've got in Auckland, which I agree with, like I think it's like that's compliance driven. Like because those are obligations that we're required to do as a TA to have a dog register and have that as a function and manage noise complaints. And so the SSP here is about, did we comply with that obligation or not? It's not about community outcomes. And so, like, that's the question, is what form should the SSPs take? Is it a compliance tool to demonstrate that you're on track and meeting your obligations? Or is it actually more about the council outcomes? So that's what I'm not sure, because I had a look at the Auckland SSPs and I quite like them. But there's a range there. Like there's some that are really compliance driven, and like for example we've got one there, an after hours emergency response will be continuously provided. I would have thought that that's actually an important performance standard, but do we need it captured as an SSP? I don't know how else does that get measured. I mean, sorry, that's probably some just.
Can that stuff, if it's not SSP because it's not mandatory, guys, could that be just part of an organisational report or something like that? Yeah. We just seem to duplicate so much.
Yeah.
Yeah, there was a bit of a conversation about that last week, right? With the change in approach to organisation reporting. I think it might have been Rogan who raised like reluctance to kind of take out a whole lot of stuff when actually that's still an important measure. If it's reworded in a particular way, it's just by it being an SSP, it has a particular tone to it. An option is that council has a set of SSPs that are driven by its outcomes, so it's our 5 community outcomes, and where it doesn't align to an outcome, it would typically be a mandatory measure. I remember when I first started working in local government, there used to be it used to be called the Internal Management Report, and then there were the SSPs as well. So I think I'm wondering whether this exercise is more about what is the stuff that as a council you want to measure and connect a service to our community. Then we can go through that, and it's, well, what's an SSP versus what's actually just an important metric that you as elected members want to have regular touch points on, so that you know that we're doing the job we said we'd do.
Well, I'd agree with that, because there's some of the stuff could end up in a compliance report, actually, like in terms of legislative compliance stuff, like there's Horowhenua, all that kind of stuff. But like some of the ones that were in the Auckland one, which were good, were ones that were like the SSP was actually around, we'll have a net performer score of plus 85 or whatever it was in this particular area. And that actually seems to be more aligned with what we're trying to achieve in terms of the outcomes and the shifting the dial in terms of being more responsive and meeting expectations of our community. And so like this kind of compliance-based stuff maybe, should not be SSPs unless it's mandatory, as you say. It should be captured elsewhere just to make sure that we're on track. But in terms of SSPs, it's more a set of carefully crafted, like not too many under each activity area, so that we can actually get to the crux of, are we performing and meeting the expectations of the community or not?
What I had more issue with was the how we measure the performance versus what the service actually is. Some of them didn't correspond. I was like, well, that doesn't make sense. Like, why would I? That's not going to give me the answer to determine that that's actually what's being done. Like, they didn't marry some of them, and that's more my concern rather than, is it reflective of an outcome, or is it reflective of a, and the mandatory is what it is. You can't change those. So it's really it's there because it means something, or just take it out, like, or change it to make sense, make it meaningful.
We have been looking at a few examples like that as well. This one we pulled out was in community facilities, about customers having access to a range of current information in both print and digital format. Feedback that we got from elected members, questions about whether these measures were still relevant today, and also not required in the LTP itself. And what we noticed in the measures is that it's reporting more back on provision rather than people accessing what they're doing. So as an example of it not quite marrying up, and a way some other councils have done it is by looking at access, they're measuring the access as well, so that this one is about residents having access to internet online information, and the measure is actually about access is freely available, have access to the internet, you've got free Wi-Fi 24/7 in the libraries, and connecting it more directly like that. So it could be something else that we look at.
It's the shift from output to outcome.
Do you want some direction from the table around, are people comfortable with moving away from that more output transactional type approach to an outcomes-based approach? I'm happy to support that.
I think I'm on the right track. So my blunt reply to the SSP is basically remove the non-mandatory ones, because I just see them as duplication. And that by another thing I was referred to, this sort of stuff for me can just surely can be part of the organisational report. At times to say we're achieving all the things in the library space we said we're going to do or not. I don't need that level of detail. Happening certainly the mandatory SSPs absolutely, but the non-mandatories, I just like to see them put into the organisation report when, whether that's, I don't know how often you do that, once a year, twice a year, whatever it might be. I don't know. That might be too simplistic, I don't know, but and if it is, say so. But there's so much time goes to the stuff where.
So here's an example of why it might pay to have a few SSPs in solid waste. The WMMP, which we all have committed to do really well this time, and in order to give it some teeth, if it had some SSPs where we see it's achieved or not, and auditors looking at that, there's no other way to, I guess, keep ourselves accountable around those targets in the WMMP.
Will the NW inform that?
Well, it's just another place to. Yeah, it's about accountability, I think.
Is that not a mandatory?
No, the solid waste ones are not. They're not mandatory. But so, what's the point in doing a whole exercise on WMP and trying to make it, tight and right, and it's got no tick? Well, if it's taken out of the SSPs, it certainly doesn't.
But one of the ways that I look at SSPs is that this is ultimately your some of you have heard me talk about the contract with the community. So, like when we stand in front of our community and say we need to spend $5 million a year on community facilities, we can describe what is the value in that? Why? What is it that we're trying to achieve? Is it that we just want to open, or that we want to say we're delivering a library service, or is it that we want people to come into the building? Is it that we want people accessing the information? Now, in a future world, because I don't think we're here for this LTP, we would connect that to some broader wellbeing outcomes around literacy and numeracy, livability. I know, Sam, I'm edging on future for local government stuff here, but this is what the future for local government panel would say. What I'd encourage you to think about is if you read your current SSPs, does that tell the story to our community about why we invest in that and what value they get from that investment?
Current ones, I don't think do it well, no. But that's what the review's about, yes? Let's fix it.
The first question we should be asking our community is, have they ever read the SSPs? And I would suggest that probably for 99.9% of the population, they probably haven't. The only people that read them seem to be audit, and because they've sort of suggested that we've got too many and that they need to be refined and things like that. And I agree that the organisation performance report could give a far better picture in terms of us delivering what we said we were going to deliver than what a single line in there says, have we achieved 270,000 visitors to a public facility. I agree, it should be about the outcomes. Have we improved literacy and numeracy or accessibility to the internet in our community? Those are the things that should be driving us, I think, rather than a number-based system anyway. But that's
just a question. How much of SSPs shapes or influences what officers do? For example, an SSP around the youth engagement stuff, how many network or YEP stuff we do, or how much we enable them to implement an event or project. If a number is not in there, could we deliver them one thing a year rather than 4? Is the SSP guiding some of that stuff of what they do? Because if it is, then it needs to stay, in my opinion, for certain parts of our community. Otherwise, they've got no show.
I'll just try and make a couple of comments and see if it helps at all. So yes, I think just in relation to your question, I think there are certain, you've seen the ones for yourself where it talks about having X number of publications, X number of meetings and things like that, and obviously because we're required to report on those and no one wants to sit there with a not achieved or a red flag going into it, then yeah, I'm sure that does drive people to make sure they've got the 8th community meeting or the 10th publication out or the X number of media releases and those sorts of things. So at one level it will do that. At other levels, maybe it doesn't as much, but certainly at some levels, yes, it will drive that. When the Office of the Auditor General talks about and gives advice around LTPs and the performance framework and performance measures, it talks about these two pieces that come together. And so those are your community outcomes and your SSPs essentially. And so it talks about how there needs to be this alignment. It talks about how the community outcomes should be that rationale for why we deliver an activity, perform a function, and then the SSPs basically should reflect what council does to contribute towards achieving that community outcome. And so Caro referenced the council mark feedback that was highlighted around regulatory, and I sat in on that conversation. It was Adam who was quizzing us at this time when he was interviewing us there, and obviously we had some measures in there around how we respond to dog attacks and things. But he said, well, that's what. How does the community read that and get a sense that you've actually contributed to the community outcome of a safe community? All this is telling them that you have done X number of dogs, or you've visited your dog with an X number. It doesn't actually make a connection back to actually we're doing this activity to make the community safer, which is what our community outcome talks about. So he was really pushing us to find ways which we could find performance measures that helped give, I guess, an indication as to whether or not what we were doing was effective in terms of addressing the outcome that we said we were going to do when we said we were going to perform that function.
So, as an example, we keep our community safe by providing or responding to dog nuisances. So that's really plain and simple, but do you bullet point or shape these things in that way?
Yeah, that goes some way. And the point one of the points he was picked up on was actually you've been, not that we widely celebrate it, but we have, we've put down quite a few dangerous dogs and things like that. Why have we put them down? Because they were a danger to the community. And so here we are, we've actually been doing stuff which is actually contributing to making the community safer, but all we actually tell someone is we've gone out and done X number of visits or we've responded in a certain time, not necessarily some of the things that actually contributed to maybe the community being safer. So we're focusing on a really discrete example there, but hopefully by putting a little bit more detail around it, you can hopefully sort of understand it. I guess the point they were driving it with the council mark, and it's supported by the Office of the Auditor General in terms of when they look at performance measures, they're looking at community outcomes, being a justification why you're doing a function or a service, and then they're looking at your performance measures, your SSPs, to be the thing that says, okay, we're doing this to actually we're measuring, this is what we're going to measure as to whether or not we're actually delivering on that outcome.
So, David, does Council Mark just look at the mandatory SSPs or the non-mandatory as well?
They looked at everything. So those regulatory ones wouldn't be mandatory. And they looked, that was one that I was in that conversation, so I need to pick out the quote from the report, but they were obviously would have looked at others across the council as well. So obviously the mandatory ones, they know they can't really influence, and we share our frustrations around whether they're helpful or not helpful, but obviously it was more directed to those that we could influence.
So what would their view be of if we didn't have any, say for instance, we didn't have any non-mandatory SSPs but recorded that information in an organisational performance report or something similar? Would that be they wouldn't like that?
They probably wouldn't like that, but where we get tripped up first is by audit. You still need that double approach in terms of your community outcomes and your SSPs essentially to I forget the words Minette used, but it's essentially our commitment, our promise to the community, and it's something which says, okay, well, whether or not we believe we're actually, this is how we're going to measure whether we're being successful in upholding that promise or not.
Just picking up on Ross's point though, surely the SSP can be framed, like we can have a small set of SSPs, like under each of the activities, and I think the Net Promoter Score is actually a really good one because I think that it's really quite clean and simple. But then in the long-term plan, you just have a paragraph under the activities because you're telling them what the levels of the service are, and then you can articulate, well, this in practice, this means that when you call up with a water leak, we'll respond within X hours. And then in the annual report, we're simply just reporting on what we've done. But the SSPs are, again, quite limited. So it's just telling the story about, like, elaborating on, we think we've scored 85% on the net promoter score because we did this. Bang, 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 and just list it. So it's more about the storytelling in both the long-term plan and the annual plan, annual report rather than actually including all this detail in the actual SSPs themselves and the measures. But that just seemed cleaner and simpler.
We can test that with water early around what their appetite would be for much fewer SSPs that were only focused on mandatory and essentially customer experience.
Yeah.
But then creating a framework that described to our customer this is what they could expect, and this is how we know if we've delivered on that. So we can test that with audit. I think they'll tell us that this is what you can expect. Some of it needs to be in the SSPs, but we can get their early guidance on that. What I'm wondering off the back of the feedback, very clear feedback that we've got around outcomes, not outputs. Obviously the mandatory, but less is more, but so long as we don't lose the measures associated with so using all the feedback that some of you have given us around the current SSPs, my sense is that what's going to be most efficient is that the team go away, create a new framework for the SSPs, email that out, get kind of endorsement for the framework, but then as officers we start populating that, knowing that it won't be perfect, but then kind of bring them back and actually workshop a new set of SSPs for council to drive those activity management plans. Because I feel like we kind of need to move from the theory and the maybes to the, well, what does this actually mean? Yeah.
That approach sounds good. I'm just wondering whether, as part of that process, involving our citizen advisory groups to provide feedback on what they feel might be an appropriate measure through a community lens perspective in terms of measuring what those outcomes in SSP. I think it would be worth getting a community voice over whether that hits the mark or not.
Because at the moment, so just picking up on what you said, because at the moment the SSPs are under each activity area, but actually they could be right at the front of the document under each of the headings of the community outcomes, right? And then in the activity statements that then have the levels of service, it's basically just a little paragraph that talks about our service standards or whatever you want to call it. Like, it's actually setting out creating the expectation. We're not then creating another layer of measures or anything like that, but we can track that internally to make sure we're on track. But it's, I think the SSPs, that less is more, but actually aligning them to the community outcomes at the front of the document is going to be more use than trying to do it by activity, because it's then you've got to link it back to the outcomes. That just doesn't seem.
I'm sorry to sound like a bureaucrat, but I think they will have to be linked to the activity, so I think that will be audit's requirement of us. But in addition to that, across the 5 community outcomes, we can show the linkages.
It'd be really good if audit had a template for this, like we suggested many times.
That would be too easy.
That would be too easy.
Yeah.
Far too much common sense. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yes, it did. It's really helpful. Yeah. Yes. Yeah, I've got all kinds of ideas going through my mind. Great. So with that, pass over to Jenna to talk early engagement.
So I'm just going to begin by running through what we've heard from you so far about the approach that we'd like to take for early engagement. So in previous workshops, we've heard quite strongly that there's support for getting back to basics and the growth and future focus along with the WMMP. Won't go into too much detail there as Kara covered it earlier in the workshop. But at this stage, these are the main parts. So we'll focus more on how we're actually going to go about getting engagement. Here we go. Cool. So there's what we've got up here is there's 2 possible pathways we could take for early engagement. And the pathway that we choose really comes down to what sort of information do we want to receive back from our community. I know there's been some support for both options in earlier conversations we've had. So the first option there, so the top row we've got, so what are your new ideas for our district? Asking questions such as what actually matters to you and what do you see as the vision for the district in future years? If we're asking questions like that, that lead to more of a in-person engagement approach. Quite a lot more effort might be needed to be put in from you as elected members there. As you'll see there, the possible ways to engage is going down that route. For examples, not necessarily limited to Dragon's Dens, drop-in sessions, community events, or citizens panels. And the other pathway that we have outlined here for you right now is what we've been talking about a bit more this afternoon, is are we on the right track? Do we have the basics right? Are our priorities still correct? So that engagement approach would be looking more at receiving just direct feedback through methods such as pulse surveys, token drops, etc. So we really need some direction from you about how we'd like to approach.
I like the second option. However, I think the first option needs to be done, but should be done in a low effort manner. In a low effort manner. I think we should have not submissions, is what I'm going to call them, where people don't have to do stupid submissions in stupid formats, or go to community events, or have all of us put in loads of time, but where people with good ideas can just submit their good ideas via email or via a website. And we look through the list of good ideas and go, that's a good idea, let's put it in. Or those ideas aren't feasible, soz. Because we could spend 4 hours at a community event talking to someone about a bad idea, or we could just let them all put in their list of ideas, and the good ones we keep and use, and the bad ones we don't.
Look, I agree with Rogan. I think certainly the bottom 3 approaches. The top bit, I'd really tell officers to think about what added real value through the long-term plan amendment process. So, it may be that 2 of the 4 options is what you progress through. I think the drop-in sessions that are less formal would probably be where you want to go to and drop in around every aspect of our community, so that Wairawiri, Waikawa, Shannon, Laverne, Foxton, they all get drop-in sessions that are less formal, and potentially continue to navigate how to leverage the Citizens Advisories panel for it. But not all for, and I'd have a preference for progressing the bottom three as the main crux.
And just before we get any more feedback, just making sure elected members are really clear that this is about early engagement. So this isn't about the formal consultative process, this is about engagement, which is essentially between now and November. That's right.
I really like the surveys. The surveys things, the survey making things are so easy now. I reckon it's a great way of early engagement. So covers Rogan's thing about low effort, but get some really good stuff back. And I guess it's how we frame that too. Across that, and token drop of facilities, I think it's a great idea as well. I'm not sure how you do it, but I think we've all been to places where you do the token drop thing, and I think it's pretty good. So. And drop-in sessions I get, but I just like Rogan's term of low effort and early engagement. I think is to get, because I've been coming and speaking to a whole lot of people. A formal thing doesn't attract a lot of people that you probably get otherwise, So
just for me, I'd agree with the past comments. I guess what's a bad idea to someone is obviously a good idea for someone else. So that's how you facilitate that sort of conversation. Definitely the polls and surveys, I think, gives us a pretty clear steer, especially early on in the piece. But I also think that, like the drop-in sessions, whether it's coupled with the council or something, it does allow that sort of informal conversation. And I think sometimes you get some real good nuggets out of those sort of conversations, because people will often ask and have those sort of questions, but they won't do it in a formal sort of setting in front of peers or something like that. And I think from there, then go into obviously then go into a bit more of a formal sort of setting.
Yeah, look, I'm also with are we on the right track? Don't want to add a lot more detail to what's already been said, except to say that we got some much wider consultation through the long-term plan amendment than we thought we would get. So we got some affirmation about key things, back to basics, etc., etc. I'm on that second option.
Cara, I generally agree with everything that others have said, but are we on the right track? What are your top priorities? To get feedback, you've got to put stuff in front of them that says, is this what you think our priority should be, type of question, rather than sort of, what are your priorities? Have we got the right, are we giving them the right message in terms of what we think our basics are? I do like, there should still be the space for them to provide their new ideas. I don't want to stop people from thinking that they can't. But also, I'd like somewhere between now and when the consultation document goes out is to have a sense check through maybe a citizens panel as well. I think they do provide excellent feedback in terms of people being in the room together to be able to talk about those sorts of things, and then we will find if we are on the right track, I believe, because they're the people that are keenly interested generally and are engaged and want to provide that feedback. And I think the last one that we had, was reasonably successful in people being quite engaged and being positive, constructive about that. And I think that would be a good opportunity just to provide that sense check in terms of that feedback, whether we are on the right track early on, rather than wait till the consultation document's gone out and then ask them, are we on the right track?
Sometimes, well, I guess in the past we've targeted certain groups with the early engagement, and I don't know, rightly or wrongly, but I wondered, like, what comes to mind is Donnelly Park and the special interest groups there, and there's obviously an initial concept, but there needs to be a developed design, and there's a whole lot of players in there, and I just wondered, would they get a bit of a first touch at what that actually looks like? It doesn't mean to say that what the concept is how it is at this point, but because I guess some of their feedback or ideas could certainly shape how some of that progresses, or the priorities of it based on need or whatever. And I don't know, I'm interested to know, rather than go wider to community. I know everyone's going to pay for it, but without hearing certain voices in that example first, I wondered if I don't want to make some mistakes, you know what I mean? And then hear about it later and get hammered.
I'm wondering whether through the, because essentially we'll kind of get to end of October, middle of November, and all of the activity managers would have presented their activity management plans. You'll have a really good sense of kind of high priorities. You will have given direction on pull back, go harder, and I wonder from that there might be a list of say 5 key things where council says we want you to go deeper in earlier engagement. So for example, Donnelly Park, you might say, well, actually before we progress with that, or before we give that the green light going into the LTP as it is, can we test that with the Donnelly Park user group? Another example might be Foxton Futures, where it's, well, can we test that with Foxton Futures? Live in Town Centre, can we test that with the reference group? I know that that's probably going to happen anyway. But I just want to manage expectations that we'd probably need you to prioritise where that direct and more deeper engagement happened, because I don't think we could commit to doing that at every level against every project. It would kind of need to be the stuff that where you'd anticipate the user groups would come and make a submission later on. How do we do some engagement prior to Christmas? That's what you're saying, aren't you, Pity?
Yeah, and I didn't pick that one out because it's a big ticket item, very big, 40, what is it, whatever millions. In terms of the stuff, I'm not really, just personally, I'm flexible. Like I don't have a preference which way, like strongly, because for me, hearing from the public, good, bad and ugly, I'm all for it. Just tell me what you think and I'll just do what I think with it.
Can I just ask, just so if it is option 2, are we on the right track? What is the information that we're putting in front of them? Is it the first column on your 3 columns, or even the 3? The 3. What we've heard. You've done the ones with the So is it kind of like that on a piece of paper that says this is what we're currently planning to put together? Are we on the right track? Because it needs some context, right? Otherwise, it's an open question around what do you want us to focus on. So,
it needs a narrative built around it.
But what we were thinking was that that long sentence at the top, kind of steering it in the right direction, kind of capturing the initial thinking about what we can build a narrative from, and bring that back to you, building the pieces that we've heard from you together. Thank you.
I don't know whether I like the term getting back to basics. I would hope that we're already doing the basics reasonably well, and we don't have to go back to anything. We are continuing to provide, the basic service as well, or something like that. But getting back to basics, it almost implies that we haven't been doing them very well, and that we need to.
Focus on the basics.
And doing them right. You know, you see what I just think we're providing some negativity that might not be there or shouldn't be there.
Yeah, I'd be interested in hearing the table on that because I think there might be some different reactions around the table. What I'd say is that whole back to basics stuff comes from your top 10 priorities, where number 6, read it out to me, someone. It's in front of you.
Get basics right and support the customer-focused delivery of core services.
So, it says getting the basics right. It doesn't say getting back to basics.
Yeah. So getting the basics right, but it wasn't. Because when I talk about back to basics or getting the basics right, I'm not necessarily talking about that narrative we often hear about kind of core services or what council's basic services are. It's about making sure that we do, like we get the basics right in terms of customer services, meeting our compliance requirements, meeting our legislative requirements, tidying up a whole lot of stuff, which is kind of you're learning and we're learning as we go through things like SSP reviews or a check on our revenue and financing policy around public-private split. Like there is some, we are, a lot of our energy and intention is into, I agree, Bernie, not getting back to basics, but getting the basics right.
Well, that's exactly what I'm saying.
But I just want to check that the table agrees with that sentiment, because there seemed to be a reaction.
I do, Malik, and I think it is just the wording, because when we talked about getting back to basics, like, I think part of the conversation I recall it was, particularly if someone's been around the table for a little while, was we've been on a journey of big projects, like, over the year, over a long time now, Te Tākere, Te Awa New Strong, big, Fox and Main Street developments, Tarika, all those sorts of things. So they've taken a lot of the bandwidth in terms of, I guess, the organisation. And then the conversation was, as I recall it, given the times we're in, a good time to be now focused on the basics. So I think you are right, but I think that was part of the motivation, but getting back to basics is probably not quite the right phrase as I understand it. But I agree with, focusing on the basics probably the better term, I don't know.
What do your KPIs say? I can't remember. I'm just trying to find it.
Basics, right? You're talking the All Blacks about that?
Yeah. What's that? What is that?
Talk to the All Blacks about that, please.
See if Mr. Foster's got that KPI.
Great. Okay. Thank you. That has been really helpful. And so we'll go away and work up some. Oh, sorry, Jenna, I'm taking your spot. Go away and pull some ideas together, and you'll bring them back. Yeah. Great. So thank you. We've had some really clear direction today with the SSPs that we're moving from outputs to outcomes and looking to tell a story of what we're looking to deliver through the work that we're doing in order to meet and fulfil our community outcomes, and about engagement, that it's more that second line, allowing space for people to provide their ideas, and what we've just talked about with the narrative as well. Next steps, workshop next week is coming right back to the beginning of our session today and talking about the external facing activities. The first of 2 sessions on this, and so we'll be preparing some material for you to read ahead of time as well in the lead up to that, followed by the second one, and then feeding back about yes, early engagement as that picture builds and we get the sense of your priorities to go out to talk to the community on.
Cara, could you just explain that third bullet point, how much of our services we currently provide? What's the context for that?
I think that's an awkwardly constructed levels of service point. Apologies, as I read it up there, it came to me quite differently as to how it appeared on my computer screen. Thank you.
English teachers can be yelling. Don't worry, they speak another language up there at Foxton.
It's a very good one. I'm in it for you.
It's called cheeseburger now.
It's quite funny though. I was just
Okay, evening everyone. Welcome to number 2 of our Waste Management and Minimisation Plan workshop. I'm going to lead most of the workshop tonight, and that is because we've had a few conversations inside the business about the need to really use this workshop as an opportunity for our elected members to steer the direction on where you want the WMMP to go. And so Daniel, David and Tatiana, because they know so much, that it's really easy for us to just give you the answers or try and design the WMMP right here and now. But instead what we're going to do is go through a bit of a process whereby, hopefully by the end of this evening, you as elected members are really clear on the why, and we as officers are really clear on what that then means for the scope of this WMMP review. Hands up who's done their pre-reading and read the current WMMP. Cool, good to know.
Monica also read that letter that we got from the Waste Minimisation group the other day, who pretty much is saying our waste minimisation plan for the country is going to be driven by them, and that, you know, they haven't had a Waste Minimisation Act is 2008. It's long overdue for revamp, and they're pretty much saying they're shifting the focus of WMMPs from local goals and priorities to local delivery of national goals and priorities. So, are we getting ahead of ourselves? Are we, should we be waiting for their goals and priorities before we start thinking about what we're doing?
That's a really good thought, Mayor Burney, and we've noted that, and hopefully throughout the workshop you'll be able to give us some direction on then what you think that might mean for the scope of the WMMP, because whether we're getting ahead of ourselves or not, you as council have set this as a top 10 priority, and legally we're required to review our WMMP. It's ready for review.
Okay.
So why are we here and what do we want to get out of this evening? We're here for you to set the direction on the Waste Management and Minimisation Plan review. We want to give you clear line of sight to where we need to get to by Christmas, but we're hoping that you'll provide clarity to us on the why, what our vision is and the objectives, so that we can go away and come back with some options on the how. But also for us to hear any other feedback or aspirations that you might have about the WMMP. David and Tatiana and Daniel at our most recent workshop took you through kind of the high level timeline around the WMMP, and as you know, the WMMP is going to feed as one of those one of the 3 key pillars to our long-term plan process. And this, you've seen this before and we've talked you through it in detail, but in a nutshell, by Christmas we need to have a new draft WMMP that has fed into key consultation topics as part of the long-term plan for formal consultation come early next year. And part of it was really deliberate giving you the current WMMP to review ahead of tonight's workshop, because we're going to test your thinking throughout the workshop around what actually in our current WMMP do you disagree with and what doesn't feel fit for purpose anymore, because would be interested in throughout the course of tonight hearing from you about whether in reading that WMMP whether there was anything you actually disagreed with or whether there was anything that didn't feel relevant anymore, because in reviewing our current WMMP and comparing it to WMMPs around the country, this could be any council's WMMP. Like that, this isn't necessarily difficult work. What's difficult is about you potentially giving us the direction about where we focus our energy. But before we get into it, you're going to get up off your seats. The whiteboard on my right hand side is disagree, and the lectern on my left hand side is agree. And we're going to make some statements, and you're going to, this is for your benefit to see kind of where you sit across the spectrum with your colleagues, but also for officers to get a bit of a feel for where your heads are at. Remembering you've reviewed a WMMP ahead of tonight. You've said this is a priority, and we just wanted to test, we're wanting to see where your heads are at around some particular statements. Don't analyse the statement to death. This is gut feel. So standing up, disagree, agree. Where on the spectrum do you sit?
If you're in the middle.
Yeah, that is fine. This is a continuum. Disagree, agree. So rethink, refuse, reduce, reuse, repurpose, regift, repair, recharge. That should be council's focus, no matter the cost. Disagree, this side of the room. Agree, this side of the room.
Combined.
All of them, or any of the above.
It should be what?
No matter how much it costs.
No matter the cost. Rethink, refuse, reduce, reuse, repurpose, regift, repair, recharge, recover, recycle. The rest goes to landfill.
The oldies.
At any cost.
Yeah, why do you like the
Nina, where are you? Show us. Disagree, agree. Just stand here.
You're sitting in the middle.
I'd like to go there if central government's picking up the tab, which I think they should.
Okay.
But we need to do something if they're not going to do nothing.
Which is,
But if you can't afford it.
does anyone else want to explain their position and pick up a microphone just for our YouTube listeners who might be struggling with to see what sports theatre is going on here?
Look, I'd be over there if I knew that we could afford it, but without the financial aspect to it, I have to be here.
What we're hearing is affordability as a driver. Councillor Brannigan, tell us why you're at that end of the spectrum.
Same as Paul, exactly the same as Paul. Yep.
And I can see Councillor Jennings nodding.
Yeah, I'm the same.
Okay.
No matter the cost.
Anyone on the agree end of the spectrum that would like to share their perspective?
I'm on the sometimes it's the right thing to do, regardless of cost. But not quite almost any cost.
I mean, I don't think I need to say anything. I'm standing as far this side as I can. Let's spend the money and do things the way we should do them and not ruin the environment.
Is that not a contradiction to what you said about earlier about saving money?
Okay, thank you for sharing your...
Okay, I'm on the side because mokopuna decisions. That's why I'm here.
So effectively, we made the waste, so we should be responsible for it to some degree. And I need to know how much it costs before so I'm in the middle. Yeah. And central government does need to take some responsibility.
This is good. This is good. Okay, next question. Disagree, agree. Council should be in the game of providing a rubbish bin, wheelie bin service to our community. Disagree, agree. Don't overthink it.
Does it make money?
As opposed to a current bagged service. Look at the picture.
Bags or bins? Is that what the offer is?
Bags or bins?
Bags or bins?
Bags over bins. Bins over bags.
This is different from recycling.
Yes.
Listen to the question.
Very dictatorial. But why? Do you know that I tested this on John last night and he's a school teacher and it worked?
What do you mean?
Okay.
Hear my voice.
Hear my voice. I want bags. I want bags. I want bags. Can I have bags?
Okay, we're going to move on because this one didn't go very well. Disagree, agree. Disagree, agree. Increasing our recycling services will help us save money as a council.
Oh no, wait, that's expensive. and it's
It's a waste of time.
and it's
Maybe you might be in the middle.
The question is, increasing our recycling services will help us save money as a council.
In what term?
Yeah.
In what term? I don't think short term, long term.
29th century.
In our long-term plan.
Oh, long term. Okay.
Long-term plan, which is a 20-year plan.
Yeah. Okay. You know, I'm back over here.
is it still $2 million a year or climbing upwards?
Lots of inflation, it'll be going up.
This is just to get gut feel. It's not to answer all the questions. Disagree, agree. Our current WMMP sums it up pretty well and is fit for purpose. Disagree, agree.
It's full stuff.
Well, it's similar targets. It sums it up reasonably.
Yeah.
Get us a closer to your
Right now.
What?
The implementation is
Okay, and finally, talking about getting back to basics. Provision of rubbish, recycling and other solid waste services are a core service and priority of this council. Disagree, agree.
Just slightly agree over here.
Provision of rubbish, recycling and other solid waste services are a core service and priority of this council. Disagree, agree. Rogan, do you want to pick up a mic and tell us a little bit about why you are
know how you're collating this data into actual numbers.
This is quantitative research.
Oh, okay, great. The rubbish has to go somewhere. We're the authority in charge of that. It's that simple.
Not everyone has a big field they can dig a hole in and put their rubbish in it.
I'm not quite at the extreme because of that word provision of, so it has to be done and we need to make sure it's done, but whether we are actually in the game of doing it ourselves is the issue for me, so that's what.
People need to take responsibility for their own rubbish. Why should we take care of it for them?
Well, they shouldn't.
Then you should be able to get rid of it.
Well, I was going to say is I didn't agree with Rogan because I think there's a mistaken belief that this is a legislative role for councils, and yes, we've got skin in the game, but ultimately this is a choice as to what level of service council wants and should provide. And for me, it's a affordability thing, and outcomes. It has to have impact.
Yeah, I'm similar sort of train of thought. I guess for me, I see the council possibly facilitating some of those aspects, but I think as users and producers of rubbish, we should be taking ownership of it ourselves, and that's what I do personally. So.
Okay, you can sit back down.
Can we vote like that, for everything else?
This is far more efficient than a council debate.
Yeah, but you're allowed to have there was quite a bit of sitting on the fence in there.
So, that was just a warm up. What we're now going to do is get into a bit of workshopping around the WMMP and its purpose. And what I really encourage you to do in this first exercise is try not to don't try answer the question by the how and the what, but really focus on the why. Because it's really easy for us to jump to the, well, this is what we should do, and this is how we should do it. But what we're wanting to garner from you as elected members first is, well, why do we do it? So is you, in front of you is some post-it notes, and you can use one post-it note, you can use more than one post-it notes, but I want you to take a couple of minutes to what comes front of mind to you when we ask you the questions about why do we do what we do in solid waste. What do we want to lead? Why do we want to lead on waste minimisation and management? Why do we care? What's the why to our WMMP?
Challenge to the question. Where do we want to lead come from? The concept of leading.
What was Caro's term before when her answer was like awkwardly structured? It sounded better when I wrote it, Sam. Why are we currently providing a solid waste service to our community?
Why?
Why?
Why are we providing it?
Yeah, and so why do you want to provide a solid waste service into the future that is focused on waste management and minimisation? Why is it a top 10 priority? Why do you care?
So this is why as opposed to privatisation of a waste management service? Or
that might be the how, Rogan. So this is like, why do we do what we do? So you've got some community outcomes.
Well, the why is tied up in the if we don't, who does?
So that might be part of your answer.
From a I don't even know, sanitary type of, we provide consents around how they comply with sanitary step, and so is it relative to that?
Yeah, so health and sanitation, that might be part of the why. Feel free to write it on post-it notes. If you'd rather just verbally share it across the microphone, you're welcome to.
Or even if we wanted to understand the why around the sanitary as to the service we deliver today and why we should enhance that as part of the WMP, or why we should actually pull back from current level of service. So just helping to kind of gauge, should we do more, should we do less, and why do we feel that way? We can just sit in the middle and say just carry on as we are, but given it's a top 10 priority, it's that opportunity to really reset the direction.
So I've got 4 here from Councillor Brannigan, so I think this will help start the conversation, because no one else will. Community expectation. Careful and responsible management of waste in our district. Protect our environment. So we've got one here from Councillor Grimstone, which is demonstrate care for the environment. So there's an environment theme here. Intergenerational learnings and opportunities. Leads by example. That might line really around because no one else will. So driving a cultural change by our community when looking at waste, reducing the household quantity of waste. Why?
Oh, it's just the right thing to do.
Why is it the right thing to do?
Because we have to start somewhere.
And why do we have to start somewhere?
Because we've got too much waste.
Because we're legally obliged to.
I can't use the word environmental.
We're legally obliged to have a waste minimisation plan.
Yeah, but that could say we're doing nothing.
Yeah.
Yeah, that'd be shit, wouldn't it?
Well, that's
Yeah,
what
so
some
to comply
councils
with the
do.
law.
So we've got one here about removes a barrier. So that's kind of, so Councillor Grimstone, when you wrote that, were you thinking about like access, social inequity? Yep. Part of our community outcome, that's outstanding environment. Yeah, so someone's made a linkage here to our why being the how we bring our community outcome around outstanding environment to life. Local government is best placed to play a leadership role. We had someone else write leadership, which Rogan, is that similar to your we're legally obliged to, or is it a bit different?
No, I don't care to participate in things.
Pardon?
I don't care. Yeah, sure, whatever. Don't care.
Careful and responsible management of waste in our district. So that's a little bit about community expectation, but also about, probably lines up with the sanitation, clean streets, minimising illegal amenity. There's a bit of a like pride in our place and our space theme. There's another one that is because of if we don't do it, who will? And another one about community leadership in our role as a local authority. Anything else that people have, Sam? Because we're trying to change behaviour, but I don't agree with it.
Yeah.
But because we're trying to change behaviour.
Yeah. That's what it seems like we're doing.
We do it because our community wants the level of service at a reasonable cost. So there's a community expectation piece in there about the service we receive for the rates that we pay. It may make sense for council to play a lead role. So again, a theme around leadership. Expectations, misguided or otherwise. So again, a linkage to community expectations. And then it may be more efficient for council to provide it. So that's probably something about the no one else will, or where it makes sense.
Could it be affordable?
Yeah, it could be. It's almost a how
It's
though,
kind of
rather
like
than a why.
efficiency and optimisation.
So we've got a theme here around environment and caring for our environment. We've got a theme here around community expectations and the service they expect for the rates that they pay. We've got a theme here around local government and its compliance, but also its leadership responsibility. We've got a theme around, we could call it public safety and pride. So some of that's about sanitation, illegal dumping, clean streets, but some of that's also about kind of looking after the place that we live in. We do have a theme around kind of like access and so it's equity in terms of the whether it be driving behavioural change or changing the way that people might think and talk about waste. Is there anything, when you think about our why as a council, why we're doing WMMP, other than the fact we're legally obliged, I get it, Rogan, but to help drive the why we should put effort into this? Why is it a top 10 priority?
Well, I mean, intent of waste minimisation is ultimately, isn't it, better care for our environment, less going to the environment, less being burnt, whatever it might be. So try to minimise what we do, get rid of, to reuse, which we don't know. There's so much could be reused, but it's currently not cost effective to do that. So that's where I see it.
Just my other comments here, Monique, was around, like I said the word cultural change, but like it's actually behavioural change. So if people grow up from one generation to the next and they're used to recycling, they're used to restricting their waste, then that'll be what happens. But often it'll take time, and it's not gonna, that's something that we can actually educate on that sort of within that window.
Tatiana, do you want to flip the slide? So there's the, up on the screen are the 5 principles that in December last year you agreed would guide the decision around the future of the Levin landfill. And of course the WMMP is far broader than just the landfill decision itself. But I thought it would be helpful to try and reconcile these themes with what those principles were at the time. So supporting Council's waste minimisation and climate change objectives. So there's not been a why about climate change or necessarily minimisation, but there's certainly been a why about the environment, which aligns to the principle around protecting the environment from harm.
That might be wrapped up in a whole community expectation though, right? Because people demand services and goods. People demand services and goods for various reasons, and I'm sure that those things influence that demand or expectation.
Any other thoughts or reflections now that you've particularly been refreshed on the climate change objective? Obviously, when we talk about the Levin landfill, restoring the mana of Hokio was a key driver in Council's decision-making process. Is there, there's potentially some alignment between that and the theme around community pride and safety? Any other things going on in your mind about the why right now? No?
That's environmental stewardship, really. We're not restoring, we're wanting to uphold the fundamentals of that environmental stewardship. So, we're reducing what we do have to put on the ground, we're protecting the whenua, but in the wider environmental to make sure it's away from waterways, doesn't make waterways, and if burning's an option, how environmentally friendly is that? So I guess it's that environmental stewardship being upheld, which follows the same tone as restoring the mana of the people of Hokio for the decision that we made to close the landfill.
And then meeting Council's existing consent obligations, albeit this is talking about a particular issue that has a real alignment to the a theme that came out, which is around we have to, it's actually our legislative responsibility to be in this space. And then the minimising costs for ratepayers. We heard quite early when you were doing the little warm-up, there's a big driver in there for some of you around affordability and cost, which probably has a really strong alignment around expectations, level of service. This is the service I get for the rates that I pay. Anything else?
That was also a big part of going of the option we took, which was to close the landfill but retain the options of alternate use. That was around that minimum. A lot of that driver was minimising the cost of ratepayers, knowing we will no longer have that income from the landfill. So that was a big driver for that one.
Nina, do you want to, sorry, I just picked up your post-it note here. But in front of your placemats, obviously is our top 10 priorities, but sitting above that top 10 priorities are our values. Lena, do you want to talk about when you think about the why? How does that align?
Well, just answering the question, my why. Our values. I mean, they mean something to me. So, for waste minimisation strategy, for me, it will come from my values. As I said earlier, mokopuna decisions, if I have to take the hit now for my mokopuna to be able to survive, I will take that hit, Sam. I'm not saying that everybody has to, but that's how I envision the future. The future's only going to happen if I do my part, and if my part is I take the hit for the cost of these things, so that my mokopuna can have a better environment to live in, a lake that they can go to, a beach that they can swim in at any time, then I will take the hit now. Can I afford to? No, but I'll take the hit. Probably just like any other grandparent would.
When you look at the values on your placement in front of you, does any of that not resonate with the why that might drive the WMMP? I know that for some of you this will be feeling really fluffy, but this is how we build good strategy, is we start with the why. And as elected members, you challenged each other at the last workshop that you weren't clear on the why. So we're trying to build the why. I sense the desire to move to the how.
I have my why.
Nice. So when we asked you to sit in a continuum of, is our current WMMP fit for purpose? Most of you, there wasn't massive disagreement for that. There was general agreement that the WMMP might be fit for purpose, but I did hear someone say, if we implemented it. And so what I'm wanting you to, you don't need to put it on post-it notes this time, but just share kind of what's top of mind for you, is when you think about this WMMP, how do you want us to get there? How's this different to every other time we've done a WMMP? And how do you see there's obviously been reference to outstanding environment, but if you think about those other 4 community outcomes, how do you want to see those community outcomes represented in the plan?
Having read through the WMMP last night, I probably came to the realisation that actually we don't really need a new WMMP. We need new targets, measures, and it's the implementation. It's actually what, and it's about making those decisions around. Because I think that what's inside the WMP is there is a role for council, even though I might not think that it should be in all the places, but I think it's kind of aligned with where I sense the community expectation and feel is. But it's about the measures and the targets within it that then drive what we do, when we do it, how much we spend on it, how we prioritise it. So it's because, and I talked about this last workshop, because there's so many different things we could do, and some have much greater impact than others, but some things will be easier than others, and so people will go, oh, well, recycling's a nice thing to do, it's good, it has really good impacts, but actually are there other things that are way, way more impactful that hit the mark way better in terms of environmental outcomes, those intergenerational outcomes. And the final thing I'd say is, I've just got a negative attitude towards recycling at the moment within this council, because we had some of that stats come through the landfill decision about the cost of to dump a ton of general rubbish, a couple $100. I won't get into too commercial sensitivities, but at the cost of then disposing, recycling is much greater than that. And but then a whole bunch of that recycling is then spoiled and just gets dumped anyway. And so that just feels really inefficient, like a really inefficient use of resources, scarce resources. And yes, with the immediate answer to that is, oh, well, we could put more focus into education and making sure that there's less spoilage and all that kind of stuff. But the question is, for the money we spend on that activity, what's the outcome that we actually get? What's the impact? And could you do something way better with that money that you spend and get much better outcomes and better impact? So that's the kind of conversation I was looking to have. And so when an elected member around this table says, "Oh, we should have transfer stations in every quarter of Levin, and three recycling stations in every town." The question will be why? Like, to what end? What are you trying to achieve? And so that's the kind of conversation I'm looking to have, because I actually think that the general direction of the WMMP is reasonably sound. Sorry for the long-winded answer.
Have we done a waste assessment?
In progress.
Cool.
Challenge.
David was challenging himself not to talk. So that's all right.
Yeah, that's an integral part of the process, is the waste assessment, to look at where we are now. And a bit of scoping would go in there as well. So it feeds into the WMP. So it's quite a bit of work to do. It's actually probably almost in a way it's more work to do than it is to do the WMP in some regards.
You're interested in the insights as to what that tells us, right?
Well, it's a legislative requirement for us to do one of those before doing a WMMP, and it has the insights that drive the WMMP. But that's cool.
Any other insights or kind of reactions when we ask you about how this would look different to every other time, or how you want us to get there?
I've just gone back to the voice of the customer responses, and there's pretty general satisfaction with our rubbish and recycling. I mean, it's 78% for recycling and 90% for curbside rubbish. So obviously the community are reasonably comfortable with what we are attempting to do. I suppose it's more, is this the opportunity where we explore other things that we could do? Whether that's recovery centres or food waste or what other things that we could do. Is this the opportunity to explore those, or do we have to wait till we get general direction from government in terms of how we do things? I mean, as Sam said, what we've got at the moment is obviously working reasonably well, and it's just how we can improve, maybe make things a little better.
I don't think we're needing to wait for government. Like, I think government's given us some direction, whether that be by a climate change commission, whether it be through the waste levy stuff, or the direction they're giving around food waste services. But we've always got to be agile to the government's. The direction could change.
Waste assessment, is that going to provide perhaps current stats on, but like versus the 400 kilos, what do you call it, and what it was, what it is? Because I've got some ideas, but I probably like that now. I don't know if it's worth suggesting if the numbers show differently. Well, I have the same concerns as Sam about recycling and sort of the amount of money that we year on year putting in there, and then it just goes off to landfill because it's spoiled. And then if you look up the waste hierarchy, actually there's reuse or reduction. We could potentially be channeling that money and getting better value out of. But I don't know that until I have that data, I guess. Because, I mean, $2 million could do something significant in those other two areas, and we could actually track that far better than the results we're getting out of recycling. So that's what I'm thinking.
So the data is really important, but what I am hearing is a bit of a theme around if like the effort or energy or investment we put into it, you want to know it's achieving an outcome that links back to the why around community expectations, environment, leadership, mokopuna decision making.
And value for money.
You're very much in that vein too in terms of recycling, so I support that. Just in response to Bernie's the voice of the customer thing, I think the voice of the customer thing, people are satisfied with managed waste is that they see the red truck pull up, their bag or their bin goes in it and it's taken away. I'm not sure they think about where it's going to after that.
Couldn't agree more.
No, that's right, yeah. So I guess in terms of real waste minimisation is how, and I still don't understand how, and I'm not sure these guys hopefully do, but I don't understand how you can change those community habits of just fill up the bin. Well, the truck's coming tomorrow, shit, the bin's only half empty, I'm going to fill it up. And that's what people do. Probably we've done it ourselves, and because you're paying for it. So how you get that through the education of that, through and make real change in the community like this, I'm not sure, but hopefully the experts do. But again, I'll keep banging on about it. We have an opportunity, I think, a resource centre of some kind and do something different. I'd love to see it, but I'm just not sure how we fund it and do stop recycling and do something that does give us more outcomes. I don't know, but yeah.
Clint, is that a...
Yeah, I was just trying to pull together thought patterns. Yep, for me as a base, but I'd question how much the stuff within the existing waste management plan have we truly invested and put our heart into and given it a good go. And to Bernie's point, absolutely. Let's look at what the options could look like. Let's look at green waste. Let's look at organic waste. Let's look at what could potentially be done. Again, throwing affordability lens over it, but we haven't got too many options right now for our community, apart from the fact that we have private providers come around and take your rubbish away, or do your recycling. And I think it's an education piece down to a behaviour level. So it's being able to tell the story or tell people how they can contribute, how they can change their behaviour and what impact that has on the outcome that we want. And that one small incremental change can potentially make a really, really big difference. So I've spoken to you several times about how I pay for 2 bins every week to be emptied at whatever it costs me, and a bin and a half of that is the green waste, as in the lawns, clippings that I put in the bin to be taken away. So last week when I mowed the lawns for the very first time, against my inner self, those clippings that I clipped went into a corner of the property, and I'm going to test what that ends up looking like. But that's one behaviour change, and I think there's lots of mini micro examples around that, how we can remove some obstacles, throw out some seeds and cement some ideas that potentially could grow into wildflowers on berm-side roads and stuff like that. Just see where things go.
I'll go.
Oh, sorry. Just thinking further to what Clint's just said. Does that mean that we need to change people's behaviour, or we need to actually? So more money should be spent on education and trying to get them to, do things differently, or do we create a green waste service? I mean, that's the questions I'd like to answer, because there's a heck of a. Is it about changing people's behaviour? Is that more important than actually creating a service for them to dump their green waste somewhere?
Very good.
Yes.
Why don't we just give them a composting bin?
Yes.
So
They're all on board. Yeah.
So I sense the eagerness to kind of move from strategy into the how, and so what I think we're going to do now is because it's quite clear, kind of in listening to a few of you, that you've read the WMMP and you've been thinking about what is council's potential role in this, and so what I'm keen for us to hear from you is that, well, if we are thinking about where council puts its energy, what is it in your mind that you think will make the biggest impact? And I know that might feel a little bit cart before horse and horse before cart, but then we're going to do an exercise about, well, what are the goals? Like, what are the actual key targets we want to drive for? But I feel like you guys need to get some stuff off your chest first about what do you think the biggest impact stuff is?
We don't know what we don't know, and who's doing it well. I mean, the ones like Raglan's, they're renowned. But what else? There's initiatives, there's even one they've rolled out in Kapiti around how they reduce, like incentivising businesses to reduce, like building a network in that. So it's a bit of education, but it's a bit of like, so what's being done really well that we could just adopt rather than try and create something new if there's some proven things out there.
Yeah, I appreciate where you want to take us, but having listened to Clint and Bernie, I do wonder if there is a conversation here that we need to get a sense around this table around, and I'll call it the continuum of around behaviour change, because I think that there's a really important question there around what is the role of council in terms of I don't think we should tell people how to live, and I don't think we should try to social engineer, but I'm comfortable in a space where we can influence and encourage and educate. But I don't want us to go too far on that. I think if you think about the continuum of telling people how to live and being completely free and just leaving it to them to decide, there's a point here, right? And we are trying to change behaviours and influence behaviours, but I don't want us to go too far into that space of where people resent council because we're actually trying to interfere with their lives and tell them how to live. And so I was quite keen to get a sense of where other people see that sweet spot in terms of that continuum, because I think there's obviously there will be a range of views in the community about how far people want to try and push and influence people to change their behaviour, and I think this is an important conversation. So sorry to.
The thing that comes to me is what is the stuff that goes into our landfill that costs us? As someone said, cost doesn't matter. Cost is always going to matter. That costs us in terms of whether it's our waste levy, whether it's our emissions costs, all those sorts of things. So if that is food scraps, if that is what was the other thing? Yeah, green waste, lawn clippings. I know bad for methane. Surely that's got to be a target. That's got to be one of the fundamental things that we're trying to achieve. So and then from there, if you're making cost savings through that kind of stuff and finding other ways of dealing with that the stuff that impacts us the most, that can drive other stuff. If that made any sense at all.
Yeah, and you'll remember from the last workshop that obviously sludge is a significant driver, but organics, which is 52% of what we send to the landfill.
So on that, asking the experts again, we see green waste, you get dump green waste at the refuse stations, pay the trailer fee or whatever it is, and whatnot. Is there a market for that stuff? You know? Can that stuff pay for itself instead of going to the landfill? Is there somewhere that can go? So I guess that's all part of it as well for us to understand that. But organics is the right word,
Yeah, some of the challenges is when we look at the numbers, 52% green waste, you could automatically jump to say, well, let's roll out a green waste collection service. And so that's very much at that higher end of let's stop it going to landfill.
And the government's already mandated that they're going to make us roll out a green waste service and that they're willing to fund 50% of building facility for it.
Not just food waste. Food waste.
Food waste.
Yeah.
Green waste.
So this is the lawn clippings, and I suppose this is where it gets to the point that if we could encourage everyone just to simply dump it in the corner of the garden, I'm hearing there's not an appetite to force them to do that. But if there's some way to educate and reward, that could be stage one before we start to just carte blanche roll out a green waste collection service. So there's a number of other councils that we can pair up with. There'd be an opportunity to do a tour through company or to have a look at what's happening in MDC. But we really wanted to get a bit of a steer around what those options are around the table today before we start influencing some of the outcomes. So very much, today's about listening and understanding. We'll take that away and do some thinking based on some of that direction that you're giving, and some of this is quite helpful today, so can carry on.
So the question that Sam asked really does, this is probably a little bit about what we were trying to get out of this around the how. Does anyone want to respond to Sam's challenge around the role of council in giving options versus forcing options? That's your question, isn't it?
Yeah, it's sort of that right scale of mandate, leave it to them to decide. But yeah.
Well, from my point of view, I think we need to facilitate the change, and I mean I've used worst behaviour change and all the rest of it. But you sort of do need to incentivise, I suppose, to make some of these changes. But it's it's not hard to put your green waste under a tree and compost bin and put under your vegetable garden and all the rest of it, is it? But I guess if you don't know what you don't know and you've never done it before, then it is a challenge. But I think we have to be careful that we aren't actually going to be, waving a stick as such, because that's not going to be positive for our reputation or our culture.
Interesting, though, the targets that we're going to be set in terms of diverting waste from landfill. We're going to have to be, and council are being directed to meet an increasing minimum standard for the amount of household waste diverted from landfill. Of the total household waste placed at curbside, councils will need to divert 30% by 2026, 40% by 2028, and 50% by 2030. So we do have a major role to play in terms of, either providing different services or educating better. Somewhere along the line, we have a big role to play.
And that feels achievable, right? When you know 52% of what's currently going to landfill is organics.
Well, this is what we're going to be directed to do.
Yep, so in terms of Sam's challenge, I'm at the giving options, not forcing options, absolutely. But that thing about incentives, and I mentioned bags before, quite passionately, over bins, and the reason for that is where we can be competitive, so that on the one hand you've got the bin people who, whether or not your bin's full, they charge and they pick it up. But the beauty of the bags is about waste minimisation, because it's saying until you fill your bag, charge for the disposal. So that $4 or whatever it is, I think $4, encourages people to
make sure that they minimise as much as possible, and they will only be charged when that bag is full and they put it in. So that's an example of where we're giving options but also encouraging minimisation by being in the marketplace, giving a very effective competing thing to the bin operators.
Is there scope for us to join the Wellington Regional Waste Minimisation Plan, which is due for renewal this year? No?
They're currently out for consultation.
Can I ask
But there is totally scope for us to look for alignment so that next time the WMMPs come up for review, there's a natural hook in.
Just because they got 8 other people in theirs.
I just wanted to ask the experts a question because, like, we talk about this 52% of our current waste going to landfill is green waste. And so immediately the assumption is that's what we should focus on because that's about diverting stuff away from landfill. But, and please challenge me if this school of thought thinking is wrong, but like there's an argument, isn't there, that actually green waste, food waste, and even paper and cardboard that currently gets recycled, if that goes to landfill, it's going to break down. It's going to no, and then the methane is captured if you've got a great methane captured system. So actually, it's not that like in terms of sending it to landfill. Yes, it's not ideal, but it's not actually the worst thing in the world. If you were going to say, actually, we want to prioritise other things like e-waste, paint and chemicals, construction and demolition waste, which is much more difficult to deal with because you're actually saying, well, we're focused on impact, focused on outcomes and actually making an environmental difference. And so is that a, like, in terms of that, actually saying green waste, food waste, and paper and cardboard, notwithstanding what we might be directed to do, but actually the harm of sending that to landfill is not as great as other things that currently we have no programs around, there's no solution for, and all of that stuff still goes to landfill and then gets mixed in with all this other stuff that actually, if you could divert the nasties away from landfill, surely that would have a greater impact. So, I mean,
I'll let you explain.
Councillor Jennings, I think you're right on the money there. The green waste or food waste that goes to landfill becomes anaerobic and it produces methane. That is not really an issue because those landfills are flared, so that methane is burnt off. So the only real gain, and this has been echoed by Auckland City Council solid waste people, is that you're stopping organic resource going to somewhere where it's not going to be utilised. So you could actually harvest it here and turn it into compost or humus to enrich the fertility of the land. So that's the real reason.
So it's about inefficiency, both economic because you're sending something that you don't need to send and paying for it to landfill, and also it's inefficient because you could use it for something else more productive or valuable. That's kind of, you put it in a box, it's about inefficiency.
And also I'd like to mention that there are other ways to capture this waste that is not so expensive, because curbside collection is very expensive to implement, and oftentimes the presentation rates are quite low. So you might think you're going to get all of that waste that's potentially there that's green or organic, but you won't get. You'll probably get less than 50%, maybe even less, of that waste. So there are other ways to make it more attractive for people to actually take their waste to a place that is conveniently set up so we can harvest it or process it in a much cheaper way than curbside collection. There are other options besides curbside.
So that would be around partnering with composting facilities, working alongside our own transfer stations or transfer station suppliers to ensure that the gate rate was low or no cost, to try and attract that self-service element alongside dumping it in the corner of the garden. So there's a range of different approaches right across that spectrum, from education through curbside, through also accepting some diversion to landfill whilst focusing perhaps more on other elements that sit in the other 48%.
Okay.
So when you think about the reading that you've done of the WMMP leading up to this workshop, but also you'll remember we sent out some WMMPs prior to our last workshop.
Sorry, can I just ask a question? How do we know that the food scraps that people dispose of that goes to a facility like recycling isn't spoiled, i.e. it's wrapped in the plastic they bought it in and it's all just chucked in there rather than just the food itself scrapped, like it's tied up with the packaging and other random, a bit of metal or can, I don't know. How are you going to make sure that people are disposing of their food scraps as just the food, like how they currently don't do the recycling properly?
It is a problem getting compliance. We could step up our compliance. We'd have to employ someone that was the rubbish police person to get compliance. Or you've got to, education is only part of the problem. You can develop systems to extract all that contamination, but compliance is the best thing. If people know they can get away with it, they'll keep on doing it, and it gets worse. So you have to have some sort of compliance rubbish police to go around and check on people. Otherwise, it does get out of hand.
Yeah, that's more of the how, but yeah, if that was something we would implement, would be food waste collection, then probably would suggest getting a bin cop for the first few months or something, just for the behaviour change that we're talking about, and the contamination rates as well. And the first few loads would probably all go to landfill because they would be contaminated. People not knowing, there'd be education, we'll create stickers, there'll be a big campaign about that, big communication campaign as well.
Haven't you done it?
Yeah, so I was the bin cop in Hamilton, so that was my job, so I would know how that works. Yeah, I'd sort that out.
Not all heroes wear capes.
So in thinking about what success looks like, do you as elected members have some guidance for us about those big goals in the WMMP? So referring you back to our current WMMP, our goals are there's some targets here, and you've got it in front of you. But is diverting waste from our landfill still a goal? Yep.
Now that we haven't got a landfill, it's pretty critical, I would say.
Why?
Eh? So stop the cost of actually transporting it all out.
But it's not our cost. It's our population's cost. And so,
Our population's cost is us.
Well, it depends on what your role is.
I think we're in a facilitation role.
So,
Otherwise we'll get that the poor old guys cleaning up the rubbish for the fly tipping will be through the roof, exactly.
yeah, I would have agreed with you when we were in the game and we had a landfill. We had a incentive, as a council, to try and minimise the amount of waste that went into that landfill, so that it had some longevity, and that it was because of the capital cost to set it up, right? You wanted to, yes, there was a profit-making or a revenue-generating component to it, but ultimately it was a level of service, and we wanted to keep it going for as long as possible to serve the community. But now that we're out of that game, the minimisation piece for me is more about keeping out bad stuff that shouldn't be going into landfills that should be processed in a different way. Because, like we just heard, that actually the impact of sending like green waste and cardboard and paper, actually the benefit of trying to divert that is it's more efficient from reusing that for compost and more efficient from a cost saving perspective. But if people want to still do that and people pay for their bins themselves, or they put it in a council user pays bags, like what's our incentive to try and divert as much as possible? My core belief is that right now, because we're out of that landfill game, that it's about the most impact we can have is about keeping really bad stuff going into the landfill. That's where we're going to make the most impact, and probably in the construction and demolition waste, because I think there was a stat from the landfill discussions that about a third of the waste is construction and demolition. And we're in a growth space. We're in a growth mode. Like, if we want to make an impact, let's go where we're actually going to have an impact and reduce the environmental impact, rather than just about diverting stuff to ultimately save people money. I mean, that's for them to make that call.
We should minimise the waste because we have a legislative requirement that says a territorial authority must promote effective and efficient waste management and minimisation within the district. So that's why we should minimise the waste, because we're legally obliged to. As far as green waste to landfill, I would challenge that it is purely a cost saving. It makes the landfill run less efficiently if you've got green waste in it. It's far less efficient, the breakdown of the green waste being in a landfill as opposed to in other places. This is thoroughly researched.
Because the previous
green waste doesn't break down as well when it's mixed with other shit. The shit doesn't break down as well when there's green waste next to it. You don't want your grass clippings next to your rubbish. Those need to be in separate places.
So, picking up on the theme that, like, obviously, as Rogan keeps reminding us, like, we're legislatively required to be in this game, and the direction from government around food waste service is going to put some targets which are going to need to be reflected in that WMMP around diverting food waste. What about Sam's kind of comment around the, and I'm sure Tatiana will be able to come up with some far more articulate words than I'm going to say it, but it's about, like, keeping the baddest stuff out. Does that feel like a priority for council?
Explain what the best is, organics or chemical.
So you're talking hazardous waste, and where are you defining out?
Page 28 of our WMMP.
Where does the out go if not to a landfill?
Can I just add that hazardous waste is not allowed to go to landfill. It has to be taken out before, and that's where recycling stations should be providing the means to take toxic things at the recycling station. Then they get processed. They're not allowed to go to landfill, and we can, if we are caught doing that, they can reject our loads of waste going to landfill.
So right now, in this community, I'm sure that people who have their big red bin, or blue, or I think there's different colours, when they throw paint cans, old chemical bottles, e-waste, batteries, light bulbs, all that kind of stuff, that's now going to Bonnie Glen, right? Is that stuff harmful? Like, is that stuff that should be treated in a different way than going to a landfill?
Yeah. Yep. Correct.
So that's why I'm trying to differentiate between, in my opinion, not so nasty stuff of organic waste, food waste, paper, cardboard, question mark over plastics, but that other stuff that doesn't get filtered out, doesn't get, Because at the moment, if you want to dispose of an old computer screen or a printer or e-waste, you have to go and pay for it. And I think we've got some, a scheme that allows it. But I bet you the uptake is so small because it's a cost. It's an extra cost of having to do that. But actually, I guess the analysis I'm trying to find and get established is what we're doing overall, does it have more of an impact than if we just diverted our attention and focus and priority to doing other stuff that's not so mainstream, but actually might have a better impact because it diverts that stuff away from landfills because it shouldn't be going there. That's the question I'm asking. I don't know if I'm right.
Yeah, we don't necessarily have the answer to that right now, but I think what that's helping is prompting that at our next workshop, you're going to want to see some options that says, well, council, for us to achieve this target or that target, here are the different ways that we could do that. When we think about impact, affordability, and probably community expectation. That'd be the three lenses you'd put across it. Impact, affordability, community expectation.
Yeah, because of course our WMMP at the moment is based on a fundamental principle of user pays, and so that adds some complexity and some challenges if you're trying to incentivize or encourage particular behaviour, right? Yeah.
Can I mention if councillors would like more information about this, can I put it out there that we arrange a visit to a recycling station in Palmerston North to see how they do things and see what we can learn from that.
Or we might find one of the best in the lower North Island and take you there. Like, Palmy might not be the one we choose. There might be others we could show you. Go Claire. Is there anything else that comes to mind when you think about what you want to achieve from the WMMP?
So I was sitting here running some stuff, and what I'd love to see in the WMMP is how we're going to deal with, and it's just talking about education, how we're going to do that with our community, and not telling them what to do, but how they can do it to do what we know we need to achieve. Green waste and organics, how are we going to deal with that? Is there a place, is there a mechanism where we can open up transfer stations like you just said before, Dan? People can take the green waste there and educate obviously what can be in that green waste, whether it's trees you've chopped down, is it grass clippings, is it food scraps, all that stuff, like organics and green waste. Recyclables including building demo waste. There's so much stuff that we've all seen go into the pit at the transfer stations or into the landfill that could be recycled and reused. So much of it, Is there what does the future look like of that stuff? For me, there's employment. There's all kinds of stuff around there if we want to be, open our minds a little bit. Hazardous waste come up before batteries and stuff. I drove into the Foxton transfer station not so long ago. And that includes e-waste. And on the side of the fences, you go in there's a big row of batteries and stuff. There's a heap of old TV screens and TVs and stuff sitting over there. Now, I don't know whether people have been really nice and come and said, hey, Mr. Dumpman, here's my TV, I'll pay you $30, whatever it is, to dump it here, or whether it's buried in a whole lot of rubbish and that the worker at the transfer station said to drag it out and put it over here, I'm not sure. But so how, along over how we're dealing with all that stuff, what is the plan to deal with that stuff, and looking outside the square, be innovative, change what we do, I guess, and what is there income streams to stuff, and is there disposal mechanisms?
I'm hearing something around quality of intervention, not necessarily quantity. So if we're thinking diversion, that's not necessarily trying to hit the big number with an intervention of a curbside service. It's actually trying to get the worst outcome, most harmful, whilst we can work on the other angle to reduce quantity through perhaps more of an education reward type program. Yeah.
I think we educate the public on this stuff. We spend a lot more time in this table that never thought of it. That people will change your behaviours, but you can still have education based and why we're doing it and how you can do it.
We've certainly got some ideas, and it's been quite helpful also hearing some of these today, because when we look at the example around C&D waste, which was being numbers of around 30%, we know with the O2L project coming that there's going to be lots of C&D type waste off the back of that project. If you think about the construction that's happening with 400 houses a year, it's much the same. So in some ways the waste minimisation current plan already directs us to do something in that space, but we're not currently, we don't currently have that internal structure, a budget that sits in our long-term plan. So whether we're required to do a WMP in 2 years' time, or we don't actually need to consult with the community, we've still got to consult with the community around that investment in these initiatives. So in some ways it's not necessarily a rewrite of the WMP, it's an implementation plan around clarity on education, fixing some of the rating anomalies with the current services that are being provided, and then that asking some of those questions around some of those other initiatives. So that's I've gleaned quite a bit out of tonight that will help us, and along with perhaps arranging a site visit. So there's opportunities there, but we can't turn that service on overnight. There's quite a lot of planning, investment of time, and we really have to focus attention on that. Number of players from different regions that could establish, we could potentially have a site council owned already, or look at alternatives that you could implement a C&D facility. It's got to be there as a mandate from our community and direction from elected members to actually invest their time and financials into that.
I heard the word campaign earlier, and a couple of others are talking about education. I think it requires quite a strong strategy on its own to really get an impact. And I hear what Sam's saying about telling people what to do, but I think a message around why should you care is a better approach. Instead of telling them and then having some really strong points. And people are bombarded these days with so many messages every day, all year round. I wondered if instead of scattering across a year different initiatives, there was a 1 week that's just jam-packed full of a whole lot of activity focused on that whole clean pride sort of and key ways they can make a difference, I don't know, the best examples of it. And I just sit here and think, God's giving me not a headache, but I'm really concerned that we do a whole lot of things that don't achieve much. So anyway.
Well, if you see music month in the street, that we have bins and people.
I think, mate, you should do what if you've seen Bernie on the beat, local policeman, Tatiana on waste. I reckon Facebook.
Tatiana on trash.
On trash, Tatiana on trash. Bernie on the beat, Tatiana on trash.
Bernie on the beat.
So,
The bin cop.
The bin cop.
Tatiana talking trash. So can I? Because my sense is that really you want us to go away and you want us to auctioneer some stuff up, but I just want to make sure, because this was all about kind of allowing elected members to set the direction. Is there stuff on your mind when you think about, when you said, let's do a WMMP that would be priority? Because we could just do a WMMP as BAU, but we've not said this as BAU, we've said it's a priority. What does good look like?
It's driven because of the landfill decision and the alternate use, primarily, in my opinion. And I think there's not a challenge, but there's a reflection on whether the current model and the current level of service is doing what it should do, and whether the facilities we have in Foxton, Shannon, and Levin, whether they're kind of the right things, whether they're encouraging and promoting the right responses from the community as well. And so, like, it's that sort of hub and spoke sort of type thing where maybe you have like changes areas of service. Like, would more smaller little collection points that then feed into a bigger thing, would that encourage more uptake? Who knows? Like, presumably there's other models around New Zealand that would give us an insight into what kind of drives the outcomes and behaviour change that we're looking for.
I think part of the key to success is champions in the community. Like, unless there are actually non-council people out there championing and running with, we're supporting, it'll have a better impact because if I give you an example where Enviro Schools was a new initiative, it's been around for a few years now, but initially schools were not resistant but hesitant around having that program come into their schools. Why? Because they've got a curriculum to deliver and that's their priority, and this is something extra that they don't always have time for. And when there was a champion teacher in the school that wanted to run with, and they were all about community gardens or whatever it is, the uptake and the participation rates were better because an enthused teacher would get some enthused kids, and it's just they're all on board sort of thing. If you don't have that, it just says it falls away, hiss and a roar and it's gone. So we do need those champions in the community, and people have submitted in the last WMMP, sometimes they just submit in long-term plans and they talk about what we should be doing regarding solid waste. So why aren't we ringing those people up again and saying, hey, are you still in that space and wanting to make a difference? We're trying this now.
Just quickly, what sort of avenue have we got to explore around, like using the green waste, obviously improve organic matter on like farms and stuff. So it's then how you sort of have that sort of conversation, and then the benefit from it, because obviously there's chicken manure and all that sort of used consistently. But what can we do to explore that avenue as well? And I think there was a conversation around one of the vegetable growers keen to partake in some of that stuff, from what I gather.
I have investigated a scientist in Taupo, Michael Quirton from Germany. He's now operating a permaculture, very large site that's run in parallel with the Taupo District Council, and they not only process they process sewage sludge into Class A compost, which has been applied to land right there on their site to grow really good grass that they sell to farmers that want to buy the baleage. And he's quite confident that he can process any type of waste really that's organic, and he's doing it right now. So we can take learnings from those sort of people and do exactly what you mentioned.
When you see that stuff up on the screen, so changing our level of service, changing our fees and charges, changing our rating structure, changing the areas that we service, any of that off the table for you? No. Is any of that off the table?
No, I'm all good. I guess I'm more just probably on your previous slide, just around like, you know, the rating structures and stuff, there's probably a lot of people that are actually doing their own thing. So how do we incentivize? I mean, we're not going to break rates down and that to incentivize people, but how can we change that sort of behavioural as a result? Like, there's a whole lot of people that will be composting everything. Nothing will be going off the site as far as green waste. So how do you sort of, you know?
Yeah, we're not going to answer that now,
No,
but
that's
it's a
fine.
good thing. Yeah.
On the next slide, Shannon transfer station. That, yeah. It's open an hour a week. It's a problem.
So it's on the table.
Yeah, so it's on the table.
It's firmly on the table. It's, yeah.
It's on our property disposal stuff. Yeah.
Nothing's off the table. But would I be right in kind of just relaying back something what I think I've heard is that the current WMMP is not broken, and while there might be some things that we want to immediately change to have its biggest impact, this might not be the WMMP that achieves this, because it seeks to achieve this and do this really, really well in order to maybe build the foundations for that in time.
Yes, but it's quite interesting tonight. Like, some of the things I thought were going to be said and expressed haven't been said. But for example, during the landfill discussion, there was a lot of focus on incineration and is that a long-term goal or ambition of this council in terms of incineration and that kind of thing. And so, like, yeah, that's just intriguing because I think what you said is correct, but actually the eye to the future, that long term, what we're setting it up for, I'm not sure that there actually has been much thinking or thought around that in terms of where we're trying to head to. Definitely for me, the future use of the landfill site is an important consideration in that, because we are setting it up to have that really important conversation around, well, what is that site potentially going to be used for, and how does it fit with that future ambition?
Well, the reflection on that is probably it's about more the table having more of a focus on the controllable aspects versus other stuff you spoke about, which sits in that uncontrollable space at the moment. So being able to focus on reducing from 536 kgs per person down to 400 and down to whatever you can get it to in a really practical term, and saying that the uncontrollable piece, I think, has to remain in our thinking on the horizon as to could there or should there be something within a waste management plan or within a long-term plan that we may want to choose to invest in, because suddenly incineration becomes a scale thing that it's doable. At the moment it's not, but whatever future technologies that haven't been developed yet or could be developed through some sort of grant scheme that we don't know in front of us, and I think we've got to still be open or remain open to exploring what those left-wing greeny options are that we can't choose to invest in.
Could we draw a parallel between the two themes that are coming out of the long-term plan broadly, which is around getting the basics right and an eye to the future in terms of growth? Is that would it be fair to say that that's kind of some themes needed to be reflected in the WMMP?
Talk about incineration. David, I know you were at panel 2 council previously, so I'm not sure you had anything to do with the plant and Kawakawa at all, but I mean, it plainly didn't get across the line, and we did, obviously nationally and central government not in that space, thinking of that space yet. Probably still to come. So So whether it's got to be part of our future, potential is whether it's got to be mentioned in the plan yet. But I don't know. But it's got to be part of the conversation at some stage, surely. Got to say. And along with Sam on the site on Hokeo, the landfill. That's the option we chose. And what is the future opportunities there? And we've talked about way too now the potentials that come up there. So I just don't want to lose sight of that. So that's important.
Yeah, which is a good segue to one of the last slides, because we've got to remind ourselves that we have a debt sitting against the asset, the landfill, and we have a 30-year aftercare cost that we need to fund and be able to deliver on. But probably, while it is linked to the Waste Management and Minimisation Plan, your Waste Management and Minimisation Plan might not achieve that, might not answer those questions. That's a key strategic driver of your Solid Waste Activity Management Plan.
And you're right.
Unless you think it's the key driver of your WMMP. No.
It's good to certainly link that as part of it. And I think the language I think was used in the debate that I can recall was mitigate and minimise the effects, the impacts on the ratepayer in terms of the ongoing care of that. So derive some income if that can be linked between waste minimisation and income from that site to minimise the impacts of that. I think that's what we're achieving.
I do think, so picking up on that, I do think that a driver, though, has to be that we want to pick strategically sensible things that offset that cost. And that has to be, because that was a key part of the discussion with the landfill discussion, is that, yes, we do need a way to pay for that. And so things that we do we can't just keep doing everything in the solid waste space if it just means more and more cost on top of that. So we have to be quite sensible about the things we choose to do so that it keeps those costs under control and, where possible, offset some of this. I think that's got to be an underlying thing.
Yeah, aspirational thing perhaps. It might be around how do we actually pay this debt off whilst ensuring what we do in the minimisation space meets those environmental objectives, but is in some ways affordable or complementary. Because somehow the debt's got to be paid. Whilst we'd like to do a lot of other things, and we're also focused, currently in the next 12 to 18 months around that protection of the environment, investigation of leachate remedial type work. So there's a number of different work streams linked with the landfill and the aftercare, but we want to get clarity early on as to actually how that debt burden will be funded by the community moving forward as we bring on other initiatives.
Yeah, and I think that's an important part of that back to that one there, is that early signal about appetite around this table to how active in this space, because if we were going to do something that was about minimisation or diversion from landfill that was just Horowhenua centric, then that's probably not going to achieve that. But if the appetite was, we want to repay that cost by taking waste from other districts around C and D, maybe it's e-waste, whatever. Like, that's got to be part of the conversation. Like, it's about what can we do that furthers our own ambitions and objectives, but also meets the needs of others to pay down that debt. Because that's the only way that's going to work, I reckon, in terms of scale.
And does our long-term management of our sludge, does that come into this, or is that a separate conversation? I know you mentioned it before, the potential Taupo and whatnot, but because I go back to Lindsay from Morrison, the consultant who talked about sludge is actually a good thing in landfill from an environmental point of view. You talk about injecting of it into landfills that are seen around the world, that sort of stuff, you know. Is that still, what is our thinking in that space? And don't need to answer now, but certainly going through it's something I'd be really keen to understand more of, because I know there's a substantial cost to that. But there's, according to Lindsay, and you might agree, that there's also opportunity with it as well. So.
It's also a really good example of how, if council gives the direction that less is more, and we just want to get the basics right and deliver on the plan, because the idea of treating sludge in a different way, it's been on the table for 8 years. It's just not got any traction. It's not got time. It's not got energy, because there's been a whole lot of other stuff. So, I think that sludge is certainly a factor in the plan. So I want to wrap it up, but also just make sure there's an opportunity for any of you who haven't spoken or don't feel like you've had a chance to say what you think. Our next steps is to, and while this might have felt messy, I'm looking at all of Tatiana's notes here, and I reckon she's probably written 3/4 of the WMMP just by you talking. So consolidating what we've heard from you today, finalising the project plan for the review of the WMMP to just make sure that we've got absolute alignment on timeframes and scope, because of how this will get crunchy when it comes to things around fees and charges, areas of service, rates. Obviously, the delivery of the waste audit is a pretty critical input, so that you've got the data to further refine the prioritisation work. But really where we need to get to is, again, shift from kind of conceptual into reality. So be in a position where we present back to you based on what we've heard today, a draft vision, some goals and areas of focus, and then present some options to you for implementation, so that you're able to give guidance on that and almost prioritise that based on that notion of affordability, community expectation, and impact on environment. Is that okay? Cool. Thank you, everyone. Nothing else? Everyone's said their piece? Okay. Thank you.